So memory is something that in the last generation, psychologists have spent an enormous, and neurologists have spent an enormous time, amount of work and effort trying to understand how it works. And the more we learn about memory, the more we realize how fallible it is. And when we systematically go back and we test our memories, we find they don't do very well. So there's a famous set of studies that are called flashbulb studies, where a famous event happens, 9/11, the Challenger explosion, and you go to a large group of people, the incident happens, and you say, tell me everything you were doing, thinking on the moment when you heard that news. Where were you? Who did you talk to first? How did you feel? What happened that day? And then they go back to the same group of people a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, and they ask them the same set of questions, and they compare their answers. And lo and behold, what you discover is that not everyone, but many of the people substantially alter their memories of the event without realizing it. In other words, the first time they'll say, when I saw the towers fall, I was standing in the streets of Manhattan with my best friend Jim, tears streaming down my face. And then 10 years later, they'll say, when I first heard the towers fall, I was watching it on television in my dorm room. And I ran out, and then I ran and called my friend Jim, who was in Boston. And they're as convinced 10 years later that's what their memory was as they were the first time they related their memories on the day of 9/11. And so that kind of stuff, my point in doing the Brian Williams thing was, when you understand how fallible memory is, you are a lot more forgiving of what he did. He did something which it turns out a lot of us do all the time, which is we make what's called a time slice error. We confuse the timeline in our minds, and we think we're one place when something happened and we're in another place. Or we've heard a story been told so many times that we slowly incorporate ourselves into the story without realizing that we're doing it. And my point was that these are not sins of character. These are just facts of human memory. And we so often want to make someone's faulty memory into a test of their character, and I think that's a mistake. It's there are people who deliberately lie, absolutely, but a lot of what we think might be deliberate lying is just a manifestation of the frailty of human memoy.
So I really don't want to get into politics on this, but I do want to ask you this question to see if the way when I finished with the hearings last week, I felt, okay, I think she believes that, and it may have happened that way. I don't know. And I felt Brett Kavanaugh, I believe he believes that. They both could be telling the absolute truth, correct?
Yes. They both, I don't think either of them are deliberately lying. I think, the thing about memory is that we may honestly believe that this is what happened, even though it isn't. My best friend Bruce, I honestly believe I met him on the first day of first grade. I can picture it in my mind. He honestly believes that we met in the principal's office at the end of first grade, and we didn't even meet throughout that entire year. Right? This is one of the most important events of my life. My best friend, and we are off by 8 months. Right? And he thinks we met because we had got into a fight, and I think he came up to me and introduced himself. And we were best friends, from the beginning. I'm not lying about it. It's what I remember. But one of us completely made up that memory from whole cloth.
In fact, when you were talking about the 9/11 study, there were people who came back 10 years later. They wrote out, within a few days, if I'm not mistaken. Was it a few days or was it a year? After 9/11.
The original writing, the original time, they went to the next day.
Okay, so the next day, they asked them to write out exactly where they were, what happened. 10 years later, some of them said, I don't know why I even wrote that. This is a lie. This is not what happened. I don't know why I was lying then. And they were convinced somehow or another they made something up that was different than what they knew to be true now.
Yeah. People... one of the most important things that memory researchers will tell you is you cannot confuse confidence with accuracy. In other words, the fact that I am absolutely certain that what happened is not a reliable guide to its accuracy.